So I'm going to give you a brief update on some of the trends that we're seeing around the globe, but then really focus on what we're seeing in Australia. There's actually a lot happening in Australia, some of it behind the scenes, so I'm going to take the opportunity to use the examples across Australia to explore some of the technology that we're seeing coming our way. And then give you a brief update on where to go if you want more information, because we've got some really exciting stuff coming up in Melbourne and in Australia later this year. So firstly, just briefly around ITS Australia. ITS Australia are the peak industry body for advanced transport technologies. So we represent a range of government organisations, so peak government agencies across Australia, large corporate brands and corporate private industry companies across Australia, and then also research agencies across Australia. And we are connected globally through the ITS World Congress board. We connect with associations in Europe, across the Asia-Pacific region and across the Americas. So we have the opportunity several times a year to connect with those organisations and also to connect our industry and our organisations with a global network, because very much these trends are international, and it's important that we make sure that what we do in Australia will complement what's happening elsewhere in the world. Certainly without a car industry going forward in Australia, or without a car manufacturing industry, but we've got great technology in Australia that's feeding into what's happening internationally. So towards the future, certainly we're at an amazing time where we've got a convergence of technology. So, whether it be the Internet of Things, we've got vehicle automation, we've got big data, we've got processing capacity and automation that is creating a huge capacity for change, and we're seeing that on our road network and in our transport networks. Things like, for example, in the US over this year, we have more than 30% of the new mobile connections are to cars. So that's more new cars connected this year to the mobile network than actual telephones. So we're seeing a real transformation in the way our vehicles and our transport systems are connected. And of course that creates huge challenges. I think we've been touching with some people this morning around the challenges and Uber in the midst of that, around our regulators. What's the appropriate role for regulators going forward? How do we make sure that our regulation and policy environment is a fit with where we're going? So that's quite an interesting space. It's not just a technology challenge, but it's also a challenge for policy to make sure that I think this new technology that we've got access to, that gets shaped and formed in a way that brings really smart and livable cities. And I think what we'll start to see as this technology rolls out, that some cities will do it particularly well, and they'll be the cities where people are drawn to and where people want to live and where the high value jobs are. And then there'll be cities that are really not that successful in this space, and they'll be the cities where, if you've got no other option, maybe that's where you end up. We've got tremendous social change. So, we've got changes in jobs, changes in the way that works. Some, talk this morning about Deliveroo and how that's coming into play and what that means, in terms of the social change there. And then, of course, autonomous vehicles and where that space is going. Are we going to see things like Uber Pool, where we've got a much more shared economy and we're getting that efficiency of scale and efficient use of assets? Or are we going to move to a space where we've got individual drivers in individual cars? So again, there were some reports this morning about people, particularly this is a Victorian example, but people are choosing to live in more rural locations and are commuting back into the city where they've got the great jobs and the better paying jobs. But when we look at those individuals, they were doing a 40-minute commute in a car. They're now doing a 90-minute plus commute on public transport. So if we then look at those commutes turning into perhaps a 90-minute commute in a driverless vehicle, we're going to end up with incredibly congested cities. So it becomes important that we then move to a shared model and a shared economy, and that we have the social change to go with that, and we also have policy and regulatory framework that is supporting that sort of outcomes. So just to do a quick run around the country in terms of how the sort of response we're seeing in Australia to these different disruptions. Starting in the top corner with Queensland, we've Just last year, they were the winner of the ITS Australia award for their emergency vehicle preemption. So rather than bells and lights to get the traffic to stop, we now have traffic lights that know that there's an emergency vehicle coming their way. They will quickly check back with the TMC, the Traffic Management Centre, to verify that it's safe to change the lights, and then they will give priority to that emergency vehicle. So it's much safer for the emergency vehicles. It gives them a much quicker run through. It's improved their journey time by something like 20%. So this is an example of how technology is having a real difference in our day-to-day lives. In Queensland also, they've just launched, gone out to market to call for some ITS projects. They're looking at connected autonomy to really, and gone to industry to bring to life some of those solutions. So we look forward to, I think over the next couple of months, some announcements about the technologies that they're choosing to move forward to. In New South Wales, we have some really world-leading examples of technology that is being led here in New South Wales. So with the City project, this is a heavy vehicle, connected vehicle trial that's taking place in the Illawarra region. We have around 58 heavy vehicles that are connected. We have connected vehicle devices fitted into them, so they're retrofitted devices, and they're able to communicate with each other, with the other trucks with these devices, and they're able to communicate with the traffic lights and other roadside infrastructures. So this is implemented along a particularly dangerous stretch of road, steep, windy road. They're able to get speed alerts in vehicle to give the driver real-time information about the speed limit in the area, an alert when they're breaking the speed limit, and information about if they're getting too close to cars in front, and information about the signal phase and timing of traffic lights. So there's been some great feedback from drivers that they think this is really useful technology that they would like to see enhanced. And certainly there's been some great learnings as well. So this has been putting a technology in Australia in a particularly challenging environment. It's remote, it's steep, there's no power in some areas for these devices, so we're relying on solar power. So there's been some great learnings about how we can improve this technology. Positioning is, of course, another challenge that we face, particularly in Australia compared to other internationals. But this is one of the first trials in the world to really push this technology to these limits, and particularly in the heavy freight industry. So, we can be really proud of some of the work that's underway here in New South Wales. There are also some other great projects that are underway in New South Wales that people may not be aware of, so I don't want to steal your thunder, Tony, I hope I'm not. But particularly around some freight preemption, so giving priority to freight vehicles, and also some big data solutions, so looking at how people move around the city and how can we look at both public transport, private transport, so similar to what Uber talked about identifying where there are shared journeys, but doing these across the whole network. How can we look at perhaps tweaking our network, tweaking public transport to better fit in with private transport needs and the actual true journeys that people want to make? Can they go across town rather than into the hub and back out again, for example? So again, there's some great projects underway to really look to deliver some solutions there. Across the country, we've then got some other really interesting projects in South Australia. The changes to the laws there to allow autonomous vehicle trials, they're very much looked at around the world as quite world-leading changes to the legislation. They did the first autonomous vehicle demonstrations in the Southern Hemisphere late last year. They've still got an expression of interest out for more people to come to Adelaide, but very much the word internationally is that the changes to the legislation there are particularly appealing for internationals to come and trial technology, and they're, I guess, more supportive than the changes that they're seeing in other places around the world. At a national level, then we also have work such as the NTC's program looking at regulatory barriers to autonomous vehicles. So whether that be road or rail vehicles, our legislation is very much built around the fact that there's a driver at the wheel. There are obligations on that driver, such as if there's an accident, the driver's expected to get out and take care of that incident. So what happens with that? When there's no driver, who is responsible? What happens with the issue of insurance? Is that who's responsible for that? Is it the car? Is there someone else? So there's a lot of work happening in that space as we move to a new paradigm, really. So there's a lot more there, but I don't want to touch on all of them. What else have we got? We're also very excited to be a part of a bid for an IMove CRC. So this is a collaborative bid between industry and government, looking to really get a body of work behind a CRC that can provide a real collaborative focus to focus research energy and really get the big wins by working collaboratively across industry, across government, and across the many players and the ecosystem that's involved in the transport space. So we'll be putting that bid together. Still waiting for a bit of an update from the federal government regarding that program, but very much looking forward to a strong bid in that space as well. So I just lastly wanted to move on and give everyone an update about the ITS World Congress. So this is a really exciting activity for the transport industry in Australia. ITS Australia is hosting the ITS World Congress in Melbourne from the 10th to the 14th of October this year. This will attract over 7,000 delegates from more than 60 countries. These are leaders from government from around the world will be in Melbourne, leaders from industry and leaders from research, collaborating together to look at how we can take this technology to the next step to deliver more livable cities. We'll have themes across smart and livable mobility for smart cities, connected and automated vehicles, big data, future freight, to name a few of the themes. Part of the program, in addition to the formal Congress, which will have over 1,000 sessions during the week, is the demonstrations program. So we have access to the Grand Prix track area at Albert Park in Melbourne. So we'll be running demonstrations out there. That'll be connected vehicle demonstrations. So delegates will be taken to Albert Park along a connected urban corridor to Albert Park, where they'll experience vehicle to infrastructure technology. They'll get the opportunity to go around the Grand Prix track at speed in an autonomous vehicle. So you will see that transition from hands-on, eyes-on, to handing over to the driver, handing over to the car being in charge, avoiding any stray swans that happen to wander across, and then that transition back to the driver. And a range of other technology demonstrations taking place at Albert Park. There are also a range of technical tours going out across Melbourne, but also post-event tours taking place in Brisbane and in Sydney as well. So just a quick taste of what's taking place there and some of the companies that will be on board and some of the organisations that are on board that you'll get to meet at the Congress in Melbourne. So I just wanted to finish up on a small anecdote. I had an update yesterday from one of our partners in the delivery of this event. So as part of this event, we're working with a number of schools across Australia, and we've got I'm really excited in this particular project. We've got school students working in groups in schools across Australia on a smart city project. So these students are doing scale models of capital cities across Australia. They have got little robots that are running around that are modelling pedestrians, and then they've got autonomous cars that are there programming to look at the challenges of these autonomous vehicles. And as they solve particular autonomous vehicle challenges, they're then sharing them across the network so that everyone improves together. But I hadn't realised until yesterday that these students actually enrolled in a computer programming for gaming course. And that's what they were anticipating they were going to be doing during the year, but they chose instead to look at the transport challenges that we're facing. So instead of these students doing shoot-them-up programming and gaming, they have actually chosen to work on solving some of our transport challenges. So I thought that was really quite an inspirational note, and I'm really looking forward to seeing these on display in Melbourne in October. So there's some brochures outside, but by all means come and touch base with me if you want some more information on the World Congress in October this year. Thank you very much, Colin, and thanks everyone for your time this afternoon.